Now, this next guest has literally wowed me since day one. Now, when we met, he was telling me these stories of him traveling all over the world, pulling inspiration from all sorts of people in all walks of life. And it was crazy because I got to his office and he had this like huge bookshelf behind him with nothing but these artifacts, like literally one of the first video cameras, these artifacts, these like binoculars, these dinosaur fossils, and all sorts of different things from different walks of life. Now, he's fascinated by science, technology, and he's changed my perspective on content forever. And he runs a company called Underknown. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Steve Holford. Hey man, how's it going?
Oh, good man. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for asking. Now, what was your name?
Steve Holford.
Steve, it's such a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much for having us.
It's great to be here.
And so maybe you could tell us, do you remember the first time you made 100 grand in a year?
The first time I made 100 grand in 1 year, the year was 2000, and I moved to San Francisco. It was the dot-com boom. I took a job down in San Francisco with a company called Quokka Sports.
Now, what is Quokka Sports?
This was like the first major internet boom. The NASDAQ was venture funding tons and tons of websites. And it was like 1998 to 2001. And I took a job in San Francisco working for a sports company called Quokka. So I went down there as like a broadband producer. I was packaging up the content that they made. Okay. And these guys were wizards in like Flash. Flash was a way to put multimedia into a web browser. Lots of animations. If you did what Quokka did today, people would think it was groundbreaking and innovative. For example, like they covered the entire Everest mountain climbing expeditions.
What?
And you would browse up and down a picture of Everest and you'd see in real time where all the climbers were en route. You'd be able to click on the climber. You'd find their latest audio dispatch, a video from them, their blood pressure, their pulse. It was a really immersive way to showcase sports content. And this was 1999, 2000.
So what was like the average sports content in like, this is 20 something years ago, right?
Yeah.
So what was like considered the average content at the time? Because nowadays you can find a ton of different creative and immersive things online.
Yeah.
But back then, like what was sort of like the average?
Back then, if you went to ESPN.com or TSN.ca, you would get articles. Maybe with a photograph and the odd video. Like keep in mind back then, a lot of people were connecting to the internet through dial-up, through their telephone lines. They weren't getting broadband or fiber internet. Like the internet we have today, it was way slower. So the video was like 240 by 180. Maybe 10% of America back then had broadband internet, like fast internet.
Interesting. So what type of things were you doing exactly with this company?
I was packaging up their content,
okay,
and then they were selling it to broadband ISPs. Back then you would get, with your internet subscription, you would have all these sites you could go to that had high bandwidth content. So Quokka's sports content would appear on all these different internet service providers in America. So that's what I was doing.
Wow. So interesting. And well, congrats on making your first 100 in a year.
Yeah. When I went down there, I was making 50,000 Canadian. And I remember they asked me what my salary expectations were. And I remember negotiating, 90,000 USD as a salary.
Nice.
But, the reality was it didn't go that far in San Francisco.
Interesting. So then what kind of happened with your life after that, man?
Well, I met my wife down there, and we moved back to Toronto after the dot-com bust. We came back. We started jobs here in Canada.
And when you say we started jobs, like you and your wife just picked up like...
We picked up jobs here in Toronto, and I started working at TSN.
Okay. What type of stuff were you doing there?
Well, there I was working with a group of people to revamp TSN.ca's website. We did a whole bunch of fantasy sports stuff, modernizing that website. It was a huge, very popular, the number one sports website in Canada at the time. We were, adding industry standard ad units, building login and subscriptions and fantasy sports business, running contests and things like that.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. So next question. Do you remember the first time you did 100 grand in a month?
100 grand in a month. A partner of mine and I, we bought a business called poolexpert.com.
Okay.
And it was a fantasy pool website.
Fantasy pool?
You'd be in a pool with a fantasy league with a bunch of friends. Let's say there's 10 of you. Everyone puts in $50. and say the winner gets the purse. So that'd be $1,000 to the winner. You have to enter your fantasy picks into some software, and we provided that software. And we also sold advertising on top of it. The owner of the website sold it to us, and we mortgaged our houses
To buy a website.
To buy a website that had subscription revenue. And I remember when we turned it on, like hockey had been off on strike for an entire year, and this would have been September 2005 or something like that. We did not know whether hockey would come back big or small, and we blew away previous year numbers and made the first $100,000 in a month.
Wow. Okay.
In one of the companies that I've been part of, anyways.
Okay, so when you say one of the companies that you've been a part of, were there other companies that?
Well, yeah, at the time, I'm on my fifth startup now. The fourth one was a company called File Mobile. We built this software system that allowed media companies from around the world to gather user-generated content from the people that watch television and their journalists. So the Weather Network, for example, they would ask their people who watch their network to send in photos and videos of the weather, and then we would integrate that into their broadcast.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
When you would just kind of like watch the Weather Network and you see like this someone sending their cell phone image, like you
That's
were the
right.
software.
We powered
behind
all that.
Wow.
And we worked with broadcasters all over the world. And that business was doing, a couple $100,000 a month in reoccurring revenue when we sold it in 2015.
Wow. So you've been kind of buying and selling businesses for quite some time then.
Yeah, mostly building them from scratch.
Okay.
But that Pool Expert was one that a partner of mine and I, we bought.
Pool Experts, that was the first 100 in a month, eh?
That was the first 100 in a month.
How long did you guys own that for?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
So that whole time that you owned the website, it was collecting subscription revenue.
Subscription and advertising revenue. Yeah, we bought it. We tripled the revenue in 3 years, and we sold it.
Was the multiple that you bought it and sold it at, was it the same, or like because you changed the size?
Yeah, no, I think we ended up selling it for 10 times what we paid for it.
Wow. Hey man, congrats.
Yeah.
That's an awesome story. Okay. Now, do you remember the first time you made $100,000 in a day?
Well, that would have been when we sold that business.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I guess that's one day. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're up to now.
Well, right now, I'm the CEO of Underknown. And Underknown, we're a modern media company. We've got a team of people around the world. We produce short form content that we publish on Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok. Our mission is to educate the world about science and the humanities. We do that on 70 different video channels on those platforms.
70?
70 different channels.
How do you even wrap your head around that? Like, how did this even start?
We've got 6 brands
Okay.
that we created. What If, How to Survive, Your Body On, Crazy Creatures, Aperture.
Mhm.
We've got about 200 people working with us around the world, creating the content, publishing on those channels, and we earn reoccurring revenue from advertising on those platforms. We also license the content, and we've launched a studio where we're taking those brands and we're making long form versions of that we're going to sell to broadcasters and streamers around the world.
This is crazy, especially because now like you're making multi-hundreds, of thousands of recurring revenue every month. Now, where did this sort of start?
When I sold my last company,
That was the Weather Network.
we sold that in 2015, and the guy that bought it said, I want you to incubate your next company in this one.
Hold on. Go back to that. How do you even negotiate a deal like that? He said he wanted you to do
He
that?
wanted me to do that.
How does that relationship work?
Well, he bought the company from me and my partners.
Yeah.
I got to stay on for 18 months.
Okay.
And I got to think slowly. I got to travel and meet a lot of his colleagues around the world. He said, I want you to incubate your next startup inside this company. I mean, I had other things I was doing.
Yeah.
But what that started me into is doing a lot of research into the reoccurring revenue you could earn on YouTube at the time.
Yeah.
Facebook from video channels. This would have been 2015.
Okay.
2015, 2016. And when I left that company, I stayed for 18 months. I decided to launch what is Underknown. I started collaborating with an old colleague of mine, became my co-founder, Raphael Fay, and another co-founder named Peter Schmeichin, who's the voice of What If. And we started to basically produce short form content, factual content. You see, I grew up as a kid always reading National Geographic, the World Almanac and Book of Facts, the Book of Lists, Ripley's Believe It or Not, the Guinness Book of World Records. And I thought, why didn't they make it to the internet?
Mm-hmm.
What happened to the these brands. And we hired a data scientist. We started to discover that people love these stories.
Yeah.
There just wasn't a lot of them being produced. And the major factual players, National Geographic, History, and Discovery, weren't producing this sort of content.
Interesting.
So that was the content gap. And we decided to fill that. I raised $1 million through friends in 2017.
Okay.
And we built a team. We started running this out of my house.
This File Mobile, right? When you
Yep.
when you sold it, why would someone who buys the company want you to incubate something else while you're still on salary working with them? Like, how does that, how does that work?
I think he was thinking that this would be something that this company could then use. His interest in this idea was not something they were interested in as a company. And I didn't do anything with it. He didn't do anything. He eventually got pushed out of the company, and I left the company. And I was thinking, well, what do I do now? I started to have this idea after I left to start a digital media company, a digital video company. Certainly inspired by, by him, and actually kept in touch with him over the years. And sadly, he passed away.
My condolences.
At 39.
Wow.
In 2019. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, my condolences. Man.
So he certainly inspired me to think about this, and here we are with Underknown and 65 million followers.
So starting like a media company, right? Like you mentioned, you raised $1 million for this. What was the revenue model right out the gate? And like starting a channel, how were you so confident that you were going to get viewership for sure?
Out of the gate, I wasn't quite sure what the revenue model would be. So I proposed that we were going to build what I called like the 5-legged table.
Okay, what's that?
So it was, I knew that media company needed to have diversified revenue. We would have multiple revenue streams. Programmatic advertising was one, on video, on websites. Licensing the content was another one. Potentially product sales and e-commerce.
Okay.
We thought we'd be able to incubate these brands on social media, get huge followings, and then make long form versions and sell it in television. That was the original idea. And then Facebook turned on monetization. Everybody was waiting for that. And this was like early 2018. So we started to capitalize on that. We were producing shows like What If, Crazy Creatures, Your Amazing Body. These were Facebook watch pages that would generate revenue. We worked with an influencer to help us amplify that content. And that's really how the business started to make money in 2018.
Okay, so Facebook was the first dollar then.
Yep. And then we started to take that content and put it on YouTube. And we were told, yeah, that content's not going to work on YouTube. It's too short. But we just started publishing it. And I remember it took about 5 months. We got to 30,000 followers. And then it took 30 days to get to 100,000 followers.
Wow.
And 83 days to hit 1 million.
Wow. So it really took off.
It took off. And then by 2020, we started to publish on Snapchat.
Okay.
So here we were making content for Facebook, YouTube, and Snapchat. We started to take our brands and turn them into international languages in 2019.
Okay.
We started with Spanish, and then we started to launch in French and German and other languages. Wow. And that's how you quickly add up to 70 monetized channels.
Yeah. So I know that first dollar must have meant a lot, but like when did things really start to hockey stick, or have they hockey sticked yet?
I think it was late 2018. We had our first month with over 100,000 USD in revenue. And the business went from making 50 grand in 2017 to 800 grand in 2018 to 2.5 million to 3.5 to 7.2. And just this last year, we got on the Deloitte fastest growing tech companies in North America.
So would you call yourself a tech company or a media company?
Well, we call ourselves, a tech-enabled media company. People that make content at Underknown, they do it all in their browser. And so we have really strong workflow, really strong technology, some of which we built. We built a software platform called Story Suite.
Okay.
It gathers all the data from YouTube, Facebook, and Snapchat.
Okay.
And informs the creator of the content how it performed. Allows you to search and sort and find all this content, and for the publishing teams to get that content to publish.
Yeah.
The data from all of that, we build all kinds of like dashboards out of it. So a showrunner will see how their show's performing against their targets.
Okay.
Our revenue teams can see how much revenue is projected for this month, and is it on pace? So it helps us make decisions on how we run our business.
That's really interesting. Wow. So what's the future of Underknown?
Well, right now we're taking our content from short form to long form. So we'll have two sizable revenue streams. Okay. And from there, we want to basically build like Underknown as a destination on fast channels where people can watch factual content, long form and short form. Our mission is to educate the world about science and the humanities. We also want to offer online courses in things like the solar system. And we're working on a course like that right now. That's part of the next few years of growth at Underknown.
Which part of Underknown would you say fascinates you the most, or are you most proud of if you look back at the progress so far?
Well, I just think it's the team that we have that is sort of all behind this mission to educate the world about science and the humanities. Like everyone's very driven by that. And, you know, it allows us to focus on what it is we want to do. We're serving audience this content. I think what's been really interesting to watch now is how do we take a really popular short form show and turn it into a long form show. These videos are 6 to 8 minutes long on YouTube. And what we're doing is we're taking 4 different what ifs and making a 45-minute version where we're interviewing scientists in the field, and we're creating animations for things people have never seen before. And we're packaging it up into like 26 45-minute episodes for a long form streamer.
I'm curious, right? So you're just mentioning packaging up content, and it sounds a lot like back when you moved to San Francisco and we're packaging up content and selling it to, you know, these bigger companies like the TSNs, the Rogers and stuff. So I'm curious, if you were to go back and meet that Steve, what would that conversation be like? You know, what would this Steve say to that one?
That's a good question. I would say, I mean, what I've noticed is that media is constantly repeating itself.
Repeating itself.
Like the challenges that media have been the same challenges they've had for 100 years. So like, you know, Stan Lee was trying to create cartoon characters for Marvel, and they created dozens of different cartoon characters. Finally hit on Spider-Man. Spider-Man became a banger. And then Stan Lee tried to turn that from a magazine into a TV show. But Stan went to Hollywood and he believed that Spider-Man should be a live action movie. And it took him 50 years to convince people to do that. And now we look at all the different iterations of Marvel live action movies and various Spider-Man remakes. So media is constantly, we're trying to move people from YouTube to Snapchat, or Snapchat to TikTok, or YouTube to TikTok, TikTok to YouTube. We're still doing that. That's been going on forever. So the trends in media are constantly, I guess that's what I would have told myself, is that you're going to be constantly repackaging media and finding new ways to make money from the same asset that you've created.
Like you see how Stan Lee was trying to repackage, you know, the same asset that was once created. Or do you have any digital assets that you're working on, like repackaging in different mediums? Is it just the same shows? Do you have anything else in the works that?
How to Survive is something we're trying to turn into long form. Versus is a web series show that we're going to try and turn into long form. We've adapted What If to a younger audience, 6 to 9-year-olds. We created 30 episodes of What If Kids. Mm-hmm. We've actually brought children in that age group, 6 to 9, to ask these questions. And we invented this robot called Cosmo that the child interacts with to ask these questions. Like, what if there were no clouds? How rain works and how the water system on Earth works.
Crazy.
As I said earlier, we're trying to create an online course.
Okay.
So people can learn about the solar system.
What if you could only ask one more question? Not to me or like me asking you one more question. But what if you could only ask one more question? What would that question be?
I would say, when collectively is humanity going to come together to get ourselves off fossil fuels and move to solve this problem?
So what was it?
I said, what if we could solve the climate crisis?
So where can we find you?
SteveHolford.com. That's got all my links on there. Yeah, man. Good chatting with you.
Now, isn't that crazy? The fact that you can buy more cash flow than your job can provide, using that job, and then working in this new machine that you've bought, and then selling it for way more than you've bought it for. Now, if that's not betting on yourself, I don't know what is. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed meeting Steve Holford just as much as I did. Once again, this is 100 Ways to Make 100K. I'm your host, Javon.ca, and I'll see you next week on our next episode. Peace.